Welcome to this info boxing for Zatu Games. I'm Jim Gamer from What Board Game. This is Welcome to New Las Vegas. A new version of the Welcome to series is the original. We'll have a look at that in a little bit just to see the difference. This is a new Las Vegas edition. I haven't played it yet, but what I've heard is it's pretty much the same game, but adds a bit of complexity, a few new scoring options, a few new ways to make the game a little bit harder. I'll flip through this quickly, but if anyone wants to pause and have a look at these pages, feel free to do so. I'm going to have a look at this myself, and then I'm going to come back in a bit after looking at the components to see what the game is like, tell you my thoughts. So this has got a solo mode, very much like the first one, which I'll be playing first, and then I'll have a few two-player games before I talk to you about what I think. So yeah, automatically you can see that this board is a little bit more complex than the original. The main difference instantly is we're talking here we had 3 streets, here we've got 4, and then whatever that thing is on the bottom, I'm not sure, the avenues, it looks like the hotels. And this game is double-sided, so you have to use one page from one board and one from the other, whereas before this was sufficient. You had your scoring options on the bottom, the back was blank, as you can see. But other than that, I think the cards inside here are all pretty much what we're used to, just the street number and the particular power, and this I guess is the new stuff here for the hotels, and then these are the scoring, very much like the first game. So come back in a little bit, we'll play a few games, and then I'll talk about our thoughts on this, and we'll compare it to the original game. At the start of the game, each player will be dealt 2 of these sheets, one to play this side to fill in the numbers, and one this side here for their scoring. All the cards will be shuffled and dealt into 3 equal piles, with 1 card flipped over. The play starts by each player picking one of these numbers and one of these special powers. The special powers don't need to link with the numbers, so you could take this 10 and this limousine, this 9 and this calculator. They don't need to link up. Equally, all players could pick the same numbers and powers if they wanted. All players could pick this 10, for example. What you're looking to do is fill in the numbers across these streets in consecutive order, going from left to right. This is happening simultaneously, all at the same time. Ultimately, what you're doing is you're looking to take a number. Let's say we take this 9, and you'll place this here into your casino. The casinos with the cranes, you can't do that until you've built that casino by crossing off the crane. You will then pick the power, and like I said, it doesn't necessarily have to be this one because it was next to the 9, but let's show you what the limousine looks like to start with. So the limousine, that always starts here on this street light, and what you're looking to do is you drive it along the road until the next street light. On later turns, when you do more limousine moves, you will go past different things such as this VIP desk here, the fountain here, or this cash sign here. When the limousine goes past those, you circle them, and that will trigger end game scoring. You need to end the game by getting the limousine back to the start here. If you don't, you'll lose points. Obviously this route here is very short. You'd be looking to go across most of the map as possible. So that's a really fun mini game within the game that's very different to the original Welcome to. The other powers you have here is the show. So what you're looking to do is these casinos here with the star above the top of the casino, you'd be looking to activate a show there. So for here, for example, you could put a 10 here and then circle that show. If you didn't do that, let's say for example you picked the 11 and you wanted to have the calculator instead of the show, you'd put the 11 here, for example, and then you'd have to cross this off saying that you haven't got a show in that particular casino. What the calculator does is on the score sheet, it allows you on any one of these yellow boxes here to scrub off the top one. So let's just scrub this one off here to give you an example. So this now means for every single one of the hotels down the bottom here, that is the full double story one instead of the single story, I want to now get 4 points for those rather than the starting point, which I've now scrubbed off. So let's take a look at the other cards that could come up when you're playing the game. One of the other options is this crane card. When the crane comes up, what you're looking to do is cross off here one of the cranes. You can do it however you like. This is just how I happen to do that. So I'll show you how this looks here. This now means that this particular casino is ready to be opened, and on a later turn I'll be able to put a number here, and in this case anything higher than a 10. Obviously we don't want the 11, that's for this space, so 12, 13 or 14 perhaps. When you cross off the crane using the crane card, the idea is that you'll circle this money here, indicating that you've taken a loan to build this casino. At a later point, when you're putting the casino in, let's say for argument's sake of 14, you can then rub off this money to say that that money and that debt has now been paid off. Ultimately, the money you're earning from the casino being open is paying off that debt. The last card effect we haven't talked about is this inauguration card. This effect allows you to satisfy the mayor by participating in the inauguration ceremony for the city. What you're doing here is you'll cross off the leftmost space in this section here. As you can see, you start with 3 crosses already. Once you've finished a cross in any one of these pairs here, you can then use a power in a later turn. You lose the power to indicate that you would put the square around it to show that's happened. This is indicated here. You then have the ability to do one of these 3 powers here. What those powers are this: you can either add a 1 or a 2, or take away a 1 or a 2 from one of the numbers of the casinos. So for example, with this card, this could become an 8 or a 7, or a 10 or an 11. Once you do that, you cross off this space knowing that you've done that. The other thing that you can do is you can use any one of the powers here. So if you are given the option of a show, a limousine or the calculator, then you can choose the other 2, the inauguration or the crane. The final thing that you're able to do here is this third effect, which is a little bit different. What this means is that a player can open a second casino this turn. The casino must be a built casino adjacent to an already open casino directly to the right or the left. Essentially what you're doing is you're doubling the numbers. So if you'd put a 5 down, you could then put a 5 to the right or a 5 to the left. If this is the bonus that you're doing, you need to make sure that you circle the space here for the cash loan, because essentially you've spent some money in order to build that second casino. At the top street here, you'll notice that there is a golf course above each of these hotels. Each time that you fill a hotel here, so for example if we were to place a 9 here, you can then also circle this. That's not one of the card powers, that's just what you do whenever you fill a number on this top row. The only rule for this particular row is that you then can't build to the left or the right that isn't adjacent without losing the power of the golf courses. So for example, if I were to put an 11 here, this means that all of these golf courses are now scrubbed out because I haven't built adjacent to the 9 that I already had. If I was to build an 8 here, I could just circle that, 7 here, circle that, 6 here, circle that, for example. I then have these particular parts of the golf course built. These give me points at the end of the game that we'll talk about later. The first person to complete any one of these avenues, so for example if we had a 10 here, a 10 here, and let's say a 9 here for example, this avenue is now complete. They would declare that 7th avenue is complete, and if they were the first to do that, they would then circle this off. If they were not the first to do that, so let's say for example another player has completed 8th avenue, and in this case we haven't, then myself and all other players will then scrub the top off. Once we've then completed this, let's say for example we put a 10 there and an 11 up here, we still have the ability to score this, but only the bottom part of that hotel now. So that's the main differences on the actual play map. On the score map, we've talked about this top one here. So what you're looking at in the middle here is all pretty familiar to any players of Welcome To, but I'll go through it for anybody who hasn't played either game. As we talked about at the start of the game, you have these mission cards here, for example. Once they're done, the first person to score that will put that in here. So you would add whatever that you've scored here into this section here. You then total that down here into this space here. This second space here is for the inauguration. So each architect will count their crossed off boxes that have not been circled up here for the bonuses in the inaugurational track. Depending on your position, each then earn the value indicated by the first visible box in the score sheet in the space here. Remember, in the yellow boxes, you can cross them off. On this side of the chart, you'll remember there are hotels with shows. So for example, if we played a 15 and we used the show power that turn, we would then have been able to circle this off. When you do that, you also then choose to circle off the top row from here or here. You can see the choices based on how much of a risk you want to take. This one here goes to 21, this one here only to 15. But this one has more of a risk, because you'll see that there are these two dollar symbols here. In order to cross these off, you need to have crossed off every single one of these, otherwise you will owe money to the bank at the end of the game. The ones on this side of the track will get you less points, but you will get to cross off the money at an earlier stage. In the hotels here, you can write down at the bottom the amount of hotels that you crossed off in the bottom of your avenue, either the large ones, let's say 5, or the small ones because somebody else beat you to that particular avenue, let's say 2. And then depending on how many of these you've crossed off, you will then multiply that. So in this case, 1 times 2, I will get 2. Here I was able to cross the top one off, meaning it is now 4 times 5, meaning I score 20, 22 for this particular section of the scoreboard. This streets one here is a little bit different from Welcome To as well, so I'll go through this in a little bit more detail. Essentially, you will earn points equal to the longest continuous row of either odd or even casinos on each of your street. So previously in Welcome To, you're just looking to get a consecutive line. It really doesn't matter what you're doing as long as they go up or down, depending on whether you're going left or right. Whereas here, the game is actually challenging you to try and get all even or all odd numbers. This is based on Las Vegas rules regarding creating lucky things for players, for the people who are staying in the hotels to come along to. They all want to stay in a particular even or odd row. So depending on whether you've got 5 evens in a row or 4 odds, whatever that is, you would then mark that down into this space here. Then for each street where you have the longest series, you then earn the street bonus based on what's going on here. Again, this is a yellow space, so these could have been crossed off at a later point, giving you higher points, depending on what you've crossed off at this point. You'll remember on the top row here, we've got these different golf holes. This will then determine the points that you score here, depending on how many par 3, par 4 and par 5 holes that you're able to open. Again, some of these could be crossed off. You mark down however many of these that you've done. You multiply the top visible number with this. So if you'd cross these off, it would be 3 times 1. If you cross these off, 7 by 2, for example, and you mark those scores there. This last one here is regarding the limousine, as you can see, and depending on how many of these symbols the limousine drove past. The last one's quite interesting. This is about whether or not the limousine made it back to the start point. You'll remember that the limousine has to start and finish at this particular part on the map. If it hasn't finished there, then depending on how many spaces away from that port it is, you then have to lose this many points. So let's say that we were 3 spaces away and we hadn't crossed any of these off. That means we lose minus 30 points for this particular bit. This either means that you need to make sure your limousine is either close or back to the starting point, or make sure you're crossing these off, because this is a massive negative number within the game. This last one here is regarding the rule that I haven't taken you through yet, because I didn't want to confuse you until we got to this part in the video. Essentially, at the start of the game, each player will secretly decide if they want to loan money from the bank during the game. If you choose to borrow the money, then you circle the bills here. If you choose not to borrow money, then you circle these. This then will be folded down so that no other player can see what it is that you've chosen in this particular part of the game. This is a really cool mechanic that adds a lot of fun to the game. At the end of the game, players will then reveal whether they chose to take that loan or not. If more than half the players wanted to borrow from the bank, then each player circles the 4 additional bundles of bills from the safe. If more than half the players wanted a strip bank, then each player then circles 2 additional bundles. But if no one wanted to borrow from the bank, then you don't circle any of the bundle bills in the safe. This is a really fun part of the scoring at the end of the game, especially when you're playing with larger player counts, where you get to find out exactly what everyone's done and how they've played. And of course, it affects the scoring quite a lot. Essentially, what you're trying to do here is avoid a lot of negative points here with the 20 points penalty. Otherwise, if you haven't done that, the 20 points penalty will not apply and you don't have to worry about it as long as you have got those funds available. You would then total up all of your points and give your final score. At the bottom of the score sheet throughout the game, visible to you as your plan, will be this handy guide that, now we've gone through it, will start to be a little bit more familiar with you, just explaining what the symbols mean and what they will achieve for you in terms of the points. The game also comes in the box with a really cool solo mode that I've enjoyed quite a lot. I've played it 6 times already and I've found it to be really pleasing and very satisfying. Far better than the first one in my opinion. Particularly in solo, I think this game's a lot better due to the extra challenges that it brings. Essentially, you're up against an Acme, might be familiar to some older viewers. This stands for the Alexis Casinos and Mafia Enterprise. This is your lead competitor, essentially the architects of many ties with the mob and the politicians. Essentially, all regular rules apply, apart from a few following changes. At the start of the game, you will pick an Acme Architect card. These are all double-sided, depending on the level of difficulty that you want to go for. You then choose your 3 project cards as normal and take the city sheet and score sheet as normal. However, on the score sheet, you will divide all of the scoring bonuses in half horizontally. You score the points above the top of the line, whilst your opponent from the Acme Architect group will score below the line. You then shuffle the casino cards and create 2 equal stacks, not 3. You create a deck of casino cards effect side up by shuffling the 3 project approval cards in one of the stacks and by placing it below the other stack. These look like this. Then each turn you draw 3 casino cards and you pick and use 2 of them, for one of its number and 1 for the effect. Then discard the 2 cards and place down the 3rd card effect size up. This creates a stack for Acme. So this is similar to the original Welcome to Solo, but a little bit different in the way that the Acme player will use the card. Thus, essentially, you create a stack that will allow Acme to open its own casinos. You cannot shuffle the stack, but you can check its content at any time. If you cannot play, you check 2 boxes on the inauguration track, but you can still pick a card for Acme. When you draw a project approval card, remove it from the game and draw a new casino card. At the end of the turn, check the Acme Architect card where you'll find out the points. If Acme validates or not the project indicated by the project approval card, or whether the hotel that Acme tries to build before you. When Acme validates a project, write down its score on the score sheet. If Acme validates the project before you, flip it to its approved side. The game will end when one of the 3 regular end conditions is reached. This is that one player has finished their inauguration track, or fulfilled all 3 projects, or opened and built all of the casinos on all 4 of their streets. The scoring for the Acme is a little bit different, which I won't go through now, but you'll be able to find that yourself in the rulebook. I've really enjoyed Welcome to the New Las Vegas. I think it adds a lot of complexity to what is an already brilliant game. Welcome to is definitely one of our favourites here. We've played it a lot, but I think now if I'm ever going to play a game of this ilk, this is probably the one I'm going to turn to. I've still got quite a few unused sheets in Welcome to, and I'll probably maybe play that with people who've never played board games of this ilk before. It is definitely a better entry level game. So if you're looking for something simple in the flip and write genre, Welcome to still certainly stacks up there. But if you're looking for something a little bit more complex with a more intense and exciting solo mode, then definitely Welcome to Las Vegas could be the one for you. I think in terms of what it brings that's different to the original Welcome to is certainly the scoring mechanic is obviously more complex as we've seen. I really enjoy the mini game of the limousine driving around. Out of the 10 games that I've played so far, 6 of the games, that's definitely the thing that I chased after the most. It's really satisfying and really fun to move your car around the streets of Las Vegas. I personally find that a really fun addition to the game. I think this game offers a lot for anybody who's looking for a really cool flip and write game that scales well and plays online really well. Welcome to does that too, and so does Welcome to Las Vegas. What I mean by scale is it essentially plays as well with 100 as it would with 1 or 2. The way that works is because the game is simultaneous. Everyone's playing all at the same time. So ultimately the length of the game isn't really affected if there's 100 or 5 people playing. It works really well online because only one person needs a copy of the game. Essentially, they're the ones who are flipping the cards. Everyone else can play along either using the free app that they can download to their Android or Apple device, or they can print off some sheets at home, marking in the score sheets as they go. The game is fantastic. I've really enjoyed playing Welcome to New Las Vegas, and I would highly recommend it to anybody who's a fan of this genre or looking to add a little bit more complexity to their flip and writes. I'm Jim Gamer from What Board Game. Thank you so much for watching.